Okay, before I start this review, I just want to give a little PSA.
On my journey, trailing stardust from my shoes.
Okay, that was a really bad joke, and I apologize, but I had to make it. I hadn't done that on any of the other Pattern Seeking Animals records, so yeah, I felt like that was warranted. Anyway, let's talk about some Pattern Seeking Animals. This is Friend of All Creatures by Pattern Seeking Animals. It is a US progressive rock band. For those of you uninitiated to the PSA family, it is being led by Ted Leonard, John Bonegold, David Moros, and Jimmy Keegan. If those names sound familiar, it's because they are all either in or were a part of Spock's Beard. And I just feel like the music that they're playing within this is kind of the music that the last two records of Spock's Beard put out feel like, which is a little bit of a shame because those are the records that I'm not as much of a fan of within the post-Neil Morse Spock's Beard. For me, I love the three albums of Self-Titled, X, and Brief Nocturnes, and I know some, if not all, of those members were a part of those, but it was the Oblivion, Particle, and Floor Noise that I think they were more involved in a little bit. Not really. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Pattern Seeking Animals. So this is their, if you can believe it, fifth studio record, which I think is ridiculous, seeing as they only got their start in 2019. The only year they didn't drop an album was 2021. All other years they've dropped a record, and I feel as if they're an odd beast. You know, they're a little bit of an odd beast because none of their albums really have wowed me, but none of their albums have really disappointed me either. They have just put out pretty solidly okay records up until this point. I think my favorite one still to this point is Prehensile Tales, the second one that they put out in 2020. That's the one that really captured my attention and got me really interested and excited. Only passing through the follow-up and Spooky Action at a Distance, the one that came out I guess last year, so that would have also made that they didn't put out an album in 2024, so 2 years. I stand corrected. Anyway, this brings us to Friend of All Creature, the one that came out this year. And what can I say? It's another Pattern Seeking Animals record. If you've heard any music or any albums from Pattern Seeking Animals, you pretty much know what you're going to get at this point. It's not deviated at all from formula. It sounds pretty much exactly like the music that we've gotten to this point as well. Again, it's not grading, it's not bad, it's actually all pretty good, but at no point was I really wowed, at no point was I really excited, at no point was I really huzza'd by any of the music that's found on here, if I'm being honest. Now, that being said, the musicianship of all these players are still top notch. I love the vocals and the guitar work of Ted Leonard. He's one of my favorite frontmen of Spock's Beard, if you could call it a frontman. I love his work on the album behind me. I love Jimmy Keegan's vocal works whenever he's a little bit in the forefront, as well as within his drumming style. His rhythms and his drum beats are very aggressive. It's very bombastic, but never completely in your face or brings you out of the music. I really love Dave's bass work on here as well. It's meaty, it's chunky, it's very up front and center. I found like some of his work in Spock's Beard was kind of left on the wayside and kind of lost within the mix because there's so much going on. Just because it's the four boys on here, he's allowed to shine a little bit more. But I gotta give it to John Bonegold, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Mainly on the synth, the mellotrons, the guitars, like, and on the vocal works. Like, you can tell, like, this is more of his baby, you know, within the programming, within his structuring of sounds. His work within Spock's Beard was really good at structuring songs and structuring vibes. His work on Pattern Seeking Animals, he's allowed to really showcase his more soundscapey, more almost soundtracky style of presentation of music. And I really appreciate that. Now, that all being said, the actual music that's found on this record is still pretty good. It's just nothing really wowed me on here. You know, we've got a handful of lengthier tracks. Starts off with Future Perfect World, which is grabby. It's hooky. It's almost 10 minutes. It's 9.5 minutes long. And we go for a very well-driven drive. And I like the ebbs and flows. I like the kind of ups and downs that this track goes through, but I feel as if the almost 10 minutes never really is warranted. Like, we don't really go all over the place into something that's very exciting. That all being said, it's still a very pleasant drive. It's still a very pleasant experience. I was just waiting for something more to happen. The same can definitely be said about Another Holy Grail, which is the longest track on this album at about 12 and a half minutes. Once again, we're treated to some really great musicianship. You can tell that these guys know how to structure a track so that it feels very fluid. It feels very earned, but at no point am I ever bored. At no point am I ever looking at my watch, but also I'm never looking forward to whatever the next bend or turn is. I think like one of my favorite tracks on here is In My Dying Day, which is one of the shorter tracks, in that it feels a little bit more of that Western flavor. And they were really playing this very well on Prehensile Tales, their second album, that had a little bit more of that, Fistful of Pennies or, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly kind of a soundtrack, a little bit more of that spaghetti Western feel, that kind of like, the tension building and the styles of this lonely wanderer. And In My Dying Days kind of still has that very hooky, very immediate, very memorable passage. It's one of the few songs that afterwards I can be like, oh yeah, now I remember this one. That being said, there's some moments that they decide to try something new and try to do something exciting, like the Seven Sleeper, which sounds very off-brand for them. Like it starts off with almost this, I don't know, like mid-2000s Owl City Coldplay synthesized lick that kind of comes out of nowhere and then never develops into anything. They just kind of like use it for a moment and then it just kind of goes away and never really returns. But that being said, because it's about 8 minutes long, there's a lot of ebbs and flows within this track that really bring, different flavors and different ideas to the forefront. And again, I like when they reintroduce some of that more Western style, that kind of, as I mentioned, spaghetti Western style of playing style. It's got that drive, it's got that groove, that jump, but there's not that hook. There's not that hook. I did jump over Down the Darkest Road, which is just kind of a throwaway ballad, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't really remember it all that much when I'm going through the different tracks in my mind. So yeah, it's just kind of I don't want to say a throwaway track, but it does kind of feel a little bit like a throwaway track. Then we come into Days We'll Remember, which I believe was a bonus track off of Floor Noise, the last Spock's Beard album, and if I'm being honest, I liked it a little bit more on Spock's Beard. It's a little longer on that one. It's got a little bit more room to grow and some leg room to play around in. It just feels a little bit more constrained here, and I'm just wondering, like, I get that was your baby, and, it should have really been on the album proper of Floor Noise, but yeah, kind of redoing it here, I don't want to say, like, put it on another bonus disc or release it as a single. It feels kind of tacked on. Then we come to the final track of Words of Love Evermore, which is a great track. It's got a great build to it. It starts off very ballady. It starts off very similar to Down the Darkest Road, but it builds and then it becomes something a little bit more exciting. It has a little bit more of a drive to it, and I like that final play out. Once again, I just wish that Pattern Seeking Animals could go beyond just being good and enough and enjoyable enough to something a little bit more exciting. Like I want to hear more of that, like X from Spock's Beard or Brief Nocturnes, where you had these big epic crescendos and these big epic moments. If you're really good at constructing those more spaghetti Western flavors within that Western style of music, lean into that. Go full board into the whole Western styles. Put out a full on, I don't know, like concept album. I'd love to see that. So yeah, in the end, this album was just another good Pattern Seeking Animals record. It's not worse than anything they've ever put out, but it's also not better than anything they put out. They are one of the most consistent album putter-outers of the progressive rock landscape at the moment. So for my final rating, I'll say Friend of All Creatures by Pattern Seeking Animals is an album I would ultimately stream. I wouldn't completely skip this record, but it is one of those things that's like, if you've heard any of the other Pattern Seeking Animal records, you've already pretty much heard this one. So yeah, if you're a fan of the band and you're really craving more Spock's Beard, I would give this one a listen, but go in knowing that you're not really going to get anything new, groundbreaking, or earth-shattering. It's just a fun, fine record. So that's what I've got for Friend of All Creatures by Pattern Seeking Animals. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's where I'm going to leave you for today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.